Hi, I'm Teresa Carberry, Education Director at New Pioneer Co-op. Welcome to the Earth Day celebration and big compost sale. It's April 30th, 2000. We've had workshops from our organic compost maker, from an organic food grower, because we're thinking about how we nurture the earth and the earth nurtures us. And because we're New Pioneer Co-op, we're looking at food. So today the compost sale will allow people who are interested in doing so to fertilize their gardens, their flowers, their vegetables and herbs naturally, learn about how to prepare compost, learn about methods of organic pest control, and then just for fun we got a little song and dance here. We have the Stones in the Field playing, and the Ceilidh dancers have come in and they're teaching and showing us traditional Irish folk dance. So it's been a great day, a chance to reflect on Earth Day, and thanks to the PATV volunteers for helping bring this to you today.
He'll tell you. Okay, here we go. 8-bar intro.
Well, my name is Erica Dana, and I'm here representing the Organic Consumers Association at the New Pioneer Earth Awareness Celebration. Today is April 30th. It's a Sunday afternoon, and the year is 2000. So I'm a local organic farmer, and I'm involved in food safety, activism and organic standards advocacy. We have lots of information here about the USDA proposed rules. They are creating federal standards for organics, and they are accepting public comments once again until June 12th. So our priority today is to have people pick up cards and letters to send in and support keeping the organic standards as high as they have been kept by independent certifiers for the last 10 years or so. We're also giving out information on legislation for food labeling on genetically engineered products. Consumers have been unwittingly eating genetically engineered food for the last 5 years, and now we're finally realizing that we should be able to choose whether or not we want to eat genetically engineered food. The only way we can assure that we aren't doing that right now is by buying and eating certified organic food, because there is no certification in organics that allows genetically engineered crops or ingredients. But most people don't necessarily buy 100% organic certified food, so we're hoping to get legislation passed sometime in the next year that would require labeling on foods that contain genetically engineered ingredients. Commonly anything that's produced from soybeans or corn. Generally, there's a good likelihood that it does contain some genetically engineered crop. Majority of the cropland in the United States has been used for GE crops for the last couple years when you're talking about corn and soybeans. Have any questions?
Tell us about your setup here, please.
My setup here? You mean illustrate what I have here to give people?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll start at one end and go to the other. Well, right here is a poster that illustrates our farm, pictures of our farm from 1998. We have been running a community-supported agriculture program, commonly known as CSA, and CSA is a way for people to buy food directly from their farmer. We have a brochure talking about CSA here. This comes from Wisconsin, from the Madison Area Community-Supported Agriculture Coalition. It talks about CSA and how to get involved with it as a farmer or as a consumer. We have the flyers for the Iowa City Farmers Market, which I'm excited about because we participate at that market on Wednesdays. And we have flyers here. It starts May 3rd, next week. We have information to enable people to understand what Governor Vilsack's position is on biotechnology in Iowa and what his Agriculture Advisory Committee has developed as far as their position recently. We have this alert, which is about the Center for Food Safety's legal action. They have actually petitioned and sued the FDA for labeling, and a number of groups are working with them on that, and this has information about that. This is from the National Campaign for Sustainable Agriculture. The USDA has appointed a committee, an agriculture committee on biotech, and they're looking for public comment and input right now during the meetings they have scheduled in the next few months. This letter goes directly to Keith Jones regarding the National Organic Program. As I said before, we're looking at new proposed standards, and we need to let them know that there are some problems with the standards they've proposed. They're an incredible improvement over the first version that were introduced a couple years ago. Those would have allowed irradiation, sewage sludge to be used as fertilizer, genetically engineered seed and crops, and those things are no longer part of the proposed rules, but there are problems with the proposed rules. Some of the wording, the language is not specific enough regarding animal husbandry practices. among other things. Here we have a set of letters to our local senators and representatives and to the USDA and Senator Jeffords about the right to know labeling legislation. This is a wonderful article about genetic engineering from Organic Gardening Magazine, which is one of the publications I like to promote because they do let your average gardener know about the national and the international situation with genetic engineering. One of the problems that consumers and farmers and environmentalists have with genetically engineered crops is that they have already been released into the environment and they can cross with native species, they can cross-pollinate with organic crops, they can compromise traditional varieties of relatives of corn, soybeans, sugar beets, whatever. And some people call genetically engineered crops living pollution because it's not the kind of pollution that can be cleaned up like an oil spill or something. It's pollution that has a life of its own, that is can basically escape any control because plants will grow as long as there is sun and light, sunlight and water and a place for them to sprout. Plants will reproduce themselves and seeds can travel via the wind, via birds, pollen can travel. So releasing these organisms into the wild before the potential consequences are known, before there has been much done in the way of testing, is considered to be extremely irresponsible by many people. Let's see, we also have the flyer from Stacy Johnson's company about her Earth Angel Heavenly Humus, which is a wonderful organic growing soil builder ingredient that she has offered right down there at that table. I'm sure you'll be visiting her. This is another article that I like to give people. This is a reprint because it got so much attention in the magazine when it came out in January-February issue of Mother Jones. It's called Pandora's Pantry, and it's a good overview of the history of genetically engineered crops, of consumer responses, and in the back it has a list of websites and organizations for people who want more information on that. This is a book that I think everyone should read. This is a wonderful book. I have another book over here called Genetic Engineering, Food and Our Environment by Luke Anderson, who's British. This book is by Martin Tidal. It's called Genetically Engineered Food, Changing the Nature of Nature, What You Need to Know to Protect Yourself, Your Family, and Our Planet. And he wrote this in collaboration with Kimberly Wilson, and Ralph Nader wrote the foreword in this book. It's a great layman's guide. It's written in terms that people can understand. The science is there, but it's explained very coherently. It has wonderful appendixes. It has a few pages of websites. It has a few pages of all the organizations that are involved in this issue, and then extensive notes and suggested reading. So if anyone isn't sure what they think about genetic engineering, I would say this is a good place to start to learn more about it. And let's see, as far as fun stuff goes, and you know, the most local food you can find is the food you grow yourself. So we have some information about non-chemical growing techniques and pesticide control information about bats as an easy way to help control insects. And over here we have pole bean planting kits for kids of all ages. with organic soil that was donated by Beautiful Land Products in West Branch, and pot markers that were donated by North Corridor Internal Medicine, and recycled plastic pots donated by Forever Green Landscaping and Nursery in North Liberty, and seeds donated by us, Catnip Farm, so that kids can learn what it's like to grow their own food and enjoy the miracle of nature, because seeds are one of the most powerful, I don't know, it's hard to say, but seeds to me are a tiny but powerful, miraculous force. And every time I see one sprout, it's like Christmas morning.
Hi, I'm Teresa Carberry, Education Director for New Pioneer Co-op. Today, April 30th, 2000, is the day of our Earth Awareness, Earth Day celebration. We've got live music and dancing, and here helping with the dance is Ed Heffernan, the Kaylee Dancers. Tell us what it's about.
What it's about is people, bringing people together to dance and have a good time, get to know each other, have it become a family type event. That's what it's about. I'm from Chicago, and that's what we do on the north side and the south side. I have great friends in Milwaukee. We all share the same passion. There's lots of dances that are figure dances that we do. It takes a little work, but it's also very aerobic, a lot of fun, and like I say, bring folks together. That's what we do.
Is this more like the step dancing, or is this more like square dancing?
Not step dancing at all, period. No, we don't work that hard. A lot like square dancing and so on. A little more complicated in the figures. Like I said, it does take some work. You do want to come to a few practices before you just go to a dance and try it. But once you learn some basics, my theory is just get out there and do it and have some fun with it, and folks will help you. That's the main thing. Kind of like the contra dancing and square dancing I've seen here. Folks will definitely take you under their wing and keep you going. We got a small group, but they're very loyal and they're very dedicated, and we just hope to make it a much bigger group very soon. And hopefully today will help us out. We appreciate being here.
Great, Ed. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Ed and the Kaylee Dancers.
At this table you can find products made available through family farmers who are a member of a community-supported agriculture group called Local Harvest. Community-supported agriculture is a movement that started in Japan about 30 years ago, and it was created based on consumers' concerns about knowing the origins of their food, how their food is treated when it is grown, and the people who grow their foods. And it moved to the United States, where people are becoming increasingly aware of important environmental issues and want to know that their food is raised in a way that is good for the environment and also good for their bodies. And the farmers of Local Harvest are very passionate and committed to environmental issues such as preserving the soil and water, not using herbicides or pesticides, treating animals humanely that they raise on their farm, not feeding the animals feed treated with growth hormones or promoters. Growers are also very committed to making healthy, organically grown vegetables accessible to everybody, regardless of finances, economic or social class. So they offer to the Johnson County area such things as vegetables raised without herbicides or pesticides, bread made from organic ingredients, handmade and baked in a brick oven on one of the farmers' farms, eggs raised from chickens, which are not caged, meats from animals that are on pasture, and who are fed grains free of herbicides and pesticides. There's no genetically modified organisms in anything that any of the farmers produce. The farmers have worked with the CSA since 1997. The main growers are the Zacharacasuts family, who live outside of Solon. There's also the Alvarez family, who live outside of Wellman, along with the Millers, who live near the Alvarez family. And they are helping, by combining their efforts, they are making each other stronger. They're helping each other spread the word about the work that they do. They're also committed to helping other farmers. So we are helping other producers, such as people who make honey, or people who make bread, people who raise turkeys and chickens. We're also helping to advertise their produce so that they can find a large market. We believe that in our community there is a great deal of concern for the wholesomeness and healthiness of the food people eat. And we share that concern. And we have found lots of friends. People are welcome to come and visit any of the farms at any time. You can bring your family, you can pet the baby goats, you can walk around the gardens, you can look at the sheep barn, you can visit the horses. There's a greenhouse on one of the farms you can look at. We have brochures which give more detailed descriptions about who we are. And those brochures are available at the New Pioneer Co-op by the free water and the phone. And you're also more than welcome to visit the ZJ farm of the Zacharacasuts, who live in Solon. Just call ahead and let them know.
Could we give a great big hand to the co-op and people who put this on today? Thank you very much. Thank you. What a wonderful thing to happen. Thank you.
Well, we're here to talk about backyard composting, right, and the different composting methods. When I first talk to people, there's two ways that you can backyard compost. One is more of the dump and runner, so just dump, leave it, and let nature take its course. The other is more of an active composting process, so you really have to work at it. A lot of people ask me, how long does it take to compost? From there, I say it's up to you. It's the more you work at it, the faster you get it. In terms of the different bins available, you know, this is more of a holding unit. The only thing wrong with this, it's a nice structure, but it dries out fast. There's a lot of air circulation going in there. So watering is very critical to composting. This you can get, you know, the fancy units. I recommend, if you're just starting out, 4 pallets tied together. And you can put lattice work over those 4 pallets on the sides to make it look better. You can do some plantings around it, but you can hinge the front of it, and you could just work into it really well. There's about 6 things that we need to remember when we're backyard composting. The first is the material themselves. When it comes to backyard composting, the carbon to nitrogen ratio is probably a real critical thing that you need to remember. And that's just, you can remember greens and browns. Greens are your nitrogen source. Linda does a lot of juicing. That's it's a really good nitrogen source. But then start mixing that with your grass clippings, you could actually have too much nitrogen. When a compost pile starts smelling, I kind of equate that to a baby's diaper. Something needs to be changed. It's not the compost pile's fault, it's our fault for doing something wrong. So we need to start changing that. There's only a couple times when it should be stinking. It's when the carbon to nitrogen ratio is off, or when there's too much moisture in there, or if you don't turn it. So it goes without air, it doesn't have ability to circulate air when it's too moist, or when there's too much greens, it just becomes like a sloppy mess. So the carbon to nitrogen, you want about a 30-to-1 ratio, and how you can remember that is like 3 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. If you have 3 small piles and mix that together, that's a pretty good mix. This isn't, with backyard composting, there's no real scientific method to do this. It's kind of, you each have your own specific materials, so you've got to kind of play with it to get that right mix with your own materials. The carbon to nitrogen ratio is real important. The next thing is the size of the material going in. The smaller the piece, the faster it will compost. So it's kind of like us eating a whole pizza pie without cutting it up, or eating it by the slice. You've got to remember the microbes in the compost pile need the same size. The smaller the piece, the faster it'll compost. The next is moisture. The moisture that you want is kind of like as wet as a wrung out sponge. Too wet, it starts smelling. Too dry, it stops composting. What I do to ensure that I have moisture being added at critical times is when I collect the food in my kitchen collection bucket, this is full, I fill it with water first before I go out there. Then I'm pre-rinsing my bucket as well as adding moisture to the container itself. So the moisture is real important. The next is turning or airflow. There's a couple ways you can do that. You can really get active and turn it with a pitchfork. You're turning away, and that's fine. The other way, if you're a lazy person like me, it's just going in. You could take a broom handle, you can take a ski pole, you can take something like this, and you just kind of put this throughout your pile. What this does, this one specifically, it goes down like this. But then when you bring it up, these things fly out, and everything on the bottom comes to the top, and you've created little air pockets in there. So the airflow of it, that's real important as well.
Where would you get those?
Well, hopefully they'll be available at the co-op, but I have them at the farm too. And I think you can get them over the internet. So, okay, we've got the carbon to nitrogen ratio.
What makes up the carbon?
Leaves. Okay, greens is like the nitrogen. The grass clippings, food waste are 2 of the most popular greens. Horse manure is another green. This is kind of a green-brown mixed together. I have, the horse manure, and then I have the bedding in with it. So that's a good carbon to nitrogen ratio, already mixed for me. The nitrogen, or the carbon, is browns. So anything brown, that would be leaves, shredded up newspapers. Like I said, most people don't realize that their vacuum cleaner bag, all we're putting in here is dirt and dirt and hair. So just remember to remove the rubber gasket and go ahead and put it in there. You can, if you want, kind of poke it with your pitchfork to break it open. But this is a perfect thing to add. You have a question real fast?
I was just wondering what a pickup truckload of...
I can usually get between 2 and 2.5 yards on a pickup, and it's $10 a yard.
Okay.
Okay? At the farm.
Yep.
Okay, yep. Okay, carbon. Okay, so the carbon source is newspapers, leaves. Those are two of the most popular. Shrub, branches with the shrubs and that kind of thing. Leaves going into the compost pile full, they have a tendency to mat, and that has a tendency to stop the water circulation, so you want to be sure to shred that. I think that's, using it as a mulch in the fall, and then using it as an additive in the spring for your compost pile. Really, we've got to start thinking about our organic waste as a resource. So even though you have tons of leaves in the fall, run them over with the lawnmower. You could have a holding unit where it's not going to decompose as greatly as if it was in a regular compost pile. Have a holding unit, and then when you have a tremendous amount of nitrogen stuff in the spring, just use it as a resource to compost everything right at that time. A typical household can divert about 650 pounds of material from the landfill and the garbage disposal a year. Out of that 650 pounds, about 80 to 85% of it is moisture. So you're going to make about 4 bags of compost. And people are a little disappointed, but you're composting moisture too. So you got to kind of remember that as well. You're not, when you're putting all this stuff in, it's kind of, you start here and you end up with this, but you're doing good for the environment, and you're making a product that you've made yourself and you can trust yourself. So I think that's real important, because right now, just because it's in a bag doesn't necessarily mean it's a good quality compost. So we've got to start asking questions of our compost. That's why I really think you should make your own first before you start buying anybody else's. So carbon to nitrogen ratio, the size of the material, the moisture content, the airflow, and then time. It just takes time, and the quicker that you get it, it just is the more you work at it, the more you turn it, the more that you make sure the moisture is correct. You should have compost in about 6 months if you do everything right. You start in the spring, you should have it ready to go in the fall. The best time to use compost is in the fall. Right now, things are popping up. It's hard to work around. Your perennials popping up. Especially in the fall with your vegetable garden, I really believe that you should put about a 2 to 3 inch layer of compost on your vegetable garden, and then plant a cover crop. We've got to start thinking like farmers. They plant a cover crop. What that does, it protects the soil from erosion, and that's one of the leading causes of water quality problems is our erosion. And then it also provides a nitrogen source for the following spring. All you do is turn it under in the spring, and you've got a good rich soil. I kind of call it the Victory Garden soil. If you ever watch Channel 12, he just, his hand just goes right into his soil. He doesn't have to worry about tilling. It's just a good soil, and that's what our eventual goal is when we add the compost. We build the soil structure.
What's a cover crop for?
A cover crop would be like a clover or a winter rye, and you can go to most wholesale seed companies and get that locally. And it just takes like a pound covered over, 40 by 80, it's, $2, and you have a great nitrogen source for the following spring.
Doesn't like come up later as weeds?
No, it's a plant, right? So no, it doesn't, because you've seeded in the fall, it grows during the winter, you have to get it to where it's grown before the snow falls, and then you turn it under in the fall or the spring, and you have a great source of nitrogen. In terms of using compost, do you have any other questions about making? It's kind of it in a nutshell. It's more of a
scraps, all kitchen scraps except dairy,
dairy, meats, cheeses, right? Oily products. Like if you have a lettuce salad and you put a ton of dressing on it, the oil or the greasy stuff kind of shellacks the material. And, when you shellac something, it's kind of petrified after a while, so it doesn't decompose. The meats and cheeses, if you've ever seen a meat underneath a microscope, there's just thousands and thousands. It's just a bundle of fuzz, and it is so hard to decompose. And that's what you're putting it in your compost pile, and it takes a long time to decompose. It putrefies basically before it decomposes, and it just stops you from, or eliminates you from creating horrible odors. The same with dairy products. So before it decomposes, it starts smelling, and you don't want that in your compost pile, especially in an urban area.
Right. What about animal waste?
Animal waste in terms
Cats
of
and dogs.
no. Well, it can be, but if you're going to use the compost on your vegetable garden, you don't want it. If it's going to be around a perennial, that's okay.
It is.
Yeah, it is, but when people hear yes you can, then they just assume it's safe for everything. That's why we say no.
Why not on your vegetable garden?
Because you've got to realize that anytime you're putting things down on the soil that you're going to eat, whatever you're putting down on the soil, you're going to uptake yourself. It goes through the plant and then you eat it. And an animal like a cat or a dog are carnivores like us, rather than the horse, which is a grain-eating herbivore. And they just have certain diseases that could be transferred to you. So that's why it's more tree, shrub, or perennials. Annuals okay, but vegetables no. Or herbs.
Activators to speed it up.
Activators, as long as you have the right carbon to nitrogen ratio in there, the moisture's good, you have a good airflow, nature takes care of itself. The activators is kind of like a waste of money.
But they're supposed to be quicker than the 6 months.
I wouldn't believe it.
Really?
No, it's just marketing. So good old horse manure will do the exact same thing. I think, this is the original activator. So no, I don't think that you're going to get it any faster.
And then horse manure, if you don't have any, you can buy it?
No, well, you can call stables around and say, do you have any extra horse manure? And I'm sure everybody's like, come on out, we're ready. So
You absolutely have to have it though to get it activated.
the horse manure? No. The traditional things that you find at your house is pretty much, especially right now, in this fall when you have a lot of leaves, if you're not going to use them for the spring, you do need a nitrogen source in the fall because the grass stops growing, basically. So the difference between backyard composting and vermicomposting, this is more of an intensive management process, and the things that you feed the worms, they can only process so much, so the amount of material that you feed them is limited to the amount of worms that you have. In the backyard composting situation, it took about 3 years before I found redworms kind of moving into my compost pile, so they're slow to come. I'm in an urban area with really tired and poor soil, so that's, I think they were just thinking, is she composting, or we're gonna, is she really gonna compost for a long time? So they finally moved in and I have tons of worms now, but you can actually get containers. I don't recommend anything fancy. There's people that sell things for, $100 to $150. Just go to Target, get an underbed storage container. What's real important with worms is the airflow into this, especially in terms of if there's not enough air, it gets real watery or real moisture retention. So it just, that is a problem in terms of odors. And then the air, the air worms have to breathe. And then sometimes it can go a little anaerobic. So the airflow is real important. And then the bedding, just shredded up newspapers, add your worms. And then what I do to the worm bin is more of a quality organic, that's what I call it. It's more of my fruits, vegetables, eggs, coffee grounds, and just good worm food. When my backyard compost bin, it's more like when I peel 5 pounds of potatoes, I peel it into a newspaper, wrap everything up together, I have a carbon to nitrogen ratio right there, and throw everything in my worm bin, or my backyard bin. So in, carrots, and if I'm making an omelet for all my family and I'm doing 12 eggs, I'll throw that in the backyard. So, I kind of, my vermicomposting complements my backyard composting. And like I said, this is more, your backyard compost is more of a soil builder. There's 3 components of a soil: the physical function of it, so how well does it absorb and hold water for your plants. Compost is like a landscape sponge, so it's really a drought prevention. They're talking about drought. If you have good organic matter in your soil, you're not going to experience a drought as greatly as if you didn't. So it holds and absorbs water and slowly releases it. It also lets your roots go freely. If you're in clay and they're trying to grow, it's hard. So you want to build your physical function of your soil. The microbial function, the organic matter just is a really good host for all kinds of good microbes. It's kind of like our own immune system. If we don't have the good bugs in us, the bad take over. The same with soil. If there's not the good bugs, the bad take over. That's when you have diseases. When you have diseases, the pests are in there to clean up. So you just kind of get into a horrible, vicious cycle if you don't have a good physical and microbial action. And then when you have those two in place, the chemical takes care of itself. You don't have to add the chemicals because everybody's working together. The microbes are actually the medium which the plant root talks to when they're hungry for something, and not just NPK or nitrogen, potassium, or phosphorus. It's calcium, it's magnesium, it's zinc, anything that they're requiring. It's the microbes that go out and get it for them and bring it back. So when those three things are working, you don't have to use the synthetic chemicals. So the backyard composting, like the compost I'm making here, is more of the physical structure builder. It does have microbial action in it, but the worm castings is more of a plant food. So it's really high in microbes, and it has a glue on it that is we hear the time released, the chemicals with time release. Well, no matter when that plant, if it needs nitrogen or not, it's being released. With worm castings and compost, I call it the right time, right kind release. At the right time and with the right kind of food, the microbes bring it to the plant. So that's the difference between using natural organics to synthetic chemicals. In terms of use, this is, the bulk compost is good for on the garden. You can make a potting mix out of it. You can use it as a chemical replacement for lawn fertilizers. You can spread it at 1/4 of an inch, very small layer around.
In those roller spreader things?
It doesn't fit in the roller spreader. They need to make one for compost.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You broadcast it. It's like,
okay.
Just a shovel. A lot of work. I'm doing research right now, and I'm making compost tea. So I'm actually taking vermicompost, and then I have about 4 other ingredients. I put it in this big vat, and I aerify it, or I add air to it, and it just gets the microbes going. It's really active. You take that 1 gallon of this tea to about 10 gallons of water, and you spray it on your lawn.
Yeah.
And then, it's not as labor intensive. You get the same benefit, and it's less money, less time, all that good stuff. So I'm kind of experimenting with this right now. There's a lot of things going on in the East and West Coast, but in Iowa, we're such a chemically oriented state. So what I'm saying, and they're like, oh, okay. So I have to prove that it works.
Hope you need any experimental sites.
I'm doing a lot in Cedar Rapids. I don't have anybody in Iowa City yet, but
I'd love to help if you need.
Okay, leave me your name and telephone number. I have somebody else interested in compost tea, so leave that for me. I don't know. That's my business card. Is it? Yeah. Or here. So in terms of the worms, the house, the surface area is probably real critical. Somebody asked, could I do it in a 5-gallon pail? Well, yeah, you could, but you don't want a pound of worms in that 5-gallon pail, maybe 1/4 to 1/2 pound of worms. But the surface area is important. You want 1 square foot of surface area for every pound of food waste that you're going to be processing during the week. So if you have 7 pounds of food waste, you want 7 square feet of surface area for the worms to work. In terms of the bedding, you can get coconut coir. That's what I use. That's my favorite. It's the hair of a coconut, and it comes in a compressed block form. But what's neat about it is the end product turns into a potting soil when you use it as a bedding rather than a newspaper. You can do a newspaper core blend, or you can do strict newspaper. The one thing I don't like about newspaper, it dries out quickly, so you're always having to squirt it with water and making sure it's core is like a peat moss replacement. It absorbs water, and it's a renewable resource versus a non-renewable, and it holds moisture real good.
Can you find it around?
I have it, and then I saw it at Osco Drug on Mount Vernon Road. Yeah, so it's available locally. So the bedding is important. The temperature, worms are really like us. They like 68 to 72 degrees. And anything colder than that, they're like, oh, I'm not working. Anything hotter than that, they're kind of just want to go somewhere cooler. So the only reason a worm would leave a bin is if it was hungry or its conditions aren't being met. It does have a will to survive just like us. If their conditions aren't being met, they want to go find greener pastures, really. So the temperature, kind of keep it, outside right now is okay, but when it gets cold, bring them inside your basement, your garage, and just remember the temperature requirements on that. The one thing, if you do take it outside first, or you take it outside during the spring and summer into the fall, there's the outdoor bugs that might get into the bin, and if you don't want to bring them in, then just keep it inside year-round. It's not going to smell. Like I said, if something's smelling in here, you're not doing something right. Same with the vermicomposting. So the temperature, let's see, the food, I like to call it the quality organics, the stuff that you might have a little of, but they love cantaloupe. The rind of a cantaloupe, it's the coolest thing because you can put it in there and the netting of the cantaloupe is all that's left. You put the whole thing in there and then you see this netting. Yeah, well, you cut it up in small pieces. The smaller the piece of the vermicompost, the faster they eat it. I think you give it to the guy with the apron on. The smaller the piece in here, the faster it composts. Now, when it comes to harvesting your bin, did you want to hear about this too, the vermicompost? I didn't know for sure. Oh, hello. Somebody was left in there, sorry. I gave a presentation over Earth Day. So, when you're harvesting your bin, here's the red worms themselves. This is about a pound of red worms. And when you first read about vermicomposting, they say a pound of worms can process a pound of food waste a day. That's not true. That is not true. And I don't know if they're eating the bedding along with that or what, but they can do maybe a half a pound if all the conditions are met. Maybe a half a pound if all their conditions are met. But when it comes to harvesting, let's say we've been feeding them, and see the little hairy things? That's coconut coir.
It's what?
Coconut coir. The little strands of brown. That right there.
Oh, wow.
So, but when I first put it in, it was, pretty much sandy brown. Now it is black, and you can tell that the worms have eaten it, and now we have their wonderful castings. But when it comes time to harvesting the castings themselves, there's a couple ways you can do it. The easiest way might be to take a window screen, lay it over the top, start feeding on the top of the screen. The worms crawl through the top, and in about 3 months or so, you'll have a few renegade worms on the bottom, but just lift that screen up, put it over, and the castings are right there. The other way is to move everything on the side of the bin. Start feeding over here. Again, they'll migrate over, and then you should have finished castings over here. The last way to do it, and this is fun for a classroom, is you dump everything on the bin or on a lid or a tarp or something, and worms don't like the light, so they start diving down. And we'll watch this. They start diving down, you start scraping off the top, and what you're getting is the castings. They'll dive down again. This takes about 6 hours to do, but you just leave a light over this. Just dive, scrape, dive, scrape, dive, scrape. Eventually you have a big clump of worms and all your castings on one side. Then you just rebed your worms and they start over. So, and then...
What size container do you need for how many?
It depends on the number of worms you get. Like a pound of worms, it's good to have something more like, the storage bin's about that big, about 12 inches deep, and about this wide. That's a perfect bin. And it's manageable. So, yeah. Any other questions? I'm trying to think.
Back to the back. I have some more questions about backyard composting. What about like fireplace ashes?
The fireplace, if it's fire rather than charcoal grills, the fireplace.
Wood
Okay, that's fine in limited quantities. You don't want to take a whole season's worth at one time and dump it into your compost bin, but more as adding as you go. You know, kind of that resource. This is a resource. And then also when you do that, your compost might be a little on the alkaline side because that's an alkaline product. So it really depends on the soil that you're working with as well. If it's on the acidic side, then an alkaline compost would be fine if you're putting it in great quantities. So, yeah.
Okay. And then these, you said you had 4 pallets, and you move from pallet to pallet?
You can.
As you go?
That's like a 3-bin system. You can do that. Or you can just, you know, have a big pile and move them that way. Or you can just work with one. Some people are amazed that, you know, you start with compost. The finished compost always goes to the bottom. And when you want to harvest the compost, all you have to do is kind of take the top off, get the bottom out, and then put it all back. So, but
So the 4 pallets, when you were talking about that, you meant 4
that would just be
sides
that right there.
tied together. Gotcha.
You can, if you want. I did it without, you know, just sticks, big sticks at the bottom to get the airflow up. That's fine too.
What about what you hear about putting like PVC with the drill?
You can do that.
through to
Yeah,
get air?
I've never done that, but you can.
Okay.
Yep, that works too. Yep.
But you still need to do all the turning and stuff. Do you have PVC or no?
The PVC is more of an aeration system itself. So
And that's what the turning's for, right?
that's what the turning is for.
So you're supposed to do less.
Less turning. You're ensuring that the airflow is getting in there. With that, you know, you can have too much air. If it gets too dry, it stops composting as well. So you got to kind of play with it. Like everybody has their individual materials, so everybody's composting system is going to be different. So if you have like a lot of wet products, juicing products, then maybe that air, you know, the PVC airflow pipe would be good. But if you have a lot of drier ingredients, you know, you might just need 1 PVC pipe versus 3. Yeah. Yep, everybody's compost pile is really different.
So you're saying that it's unrealistic to expect compost, a finished product, more than once every 6 months?
I would say you're out being a slave to your compost pile if you want it faster than that.
Even if all this tumblers and activators and all that stuff that says, you know, you can do it in 2 months and much more and all that.
You could probably do it.
Promotion.
Well, you could probably do it, but what's the quality of the compost in the 3 months? Is there big wood chips and stuff still in it? You know, what do you want? Do you want a mulch compost that's more for putting around your bin, or do you want something to incorporate into your soil? So what's the quality of compost that you want to get out of it? You know, you can turn something out. I'm turning compost out in 3 days, but but this thing, it's a very controlled process. It is the drum kind of concept, but it's not finished compost. I still have to cure it after 30 days, or I feed it to my worms. So, you know, it's a compost, but it's not the best. It's not this quality.
It's been a great celebration of Earth Day 2000. I'd like to thank Stacy Johnson and Bob Braverman, our presenters. I'd like to thank the band, Stone in the Field, for playing, the Kaylee Dancers and Ed Heffernan for joining us today, all my working members that have helped put this event on, and of course the New Pioneer Co-op supporting its community and its members supporting us. Thanks for joining us.